Hello friends, welcome to today's video. Today we're diving into cultural studies, a fascinating yet sometimes challenging subject for many college and university students. But don't worry, it's not as hard as it seems. In fact, cultural studies is practical, relatable, and quite easy to grasp once you break it down. Before we get started, here's a quick heads up. Feel free to take screenshots or jot down notes in your notebook. And if something doesn't click right away, don't stress. Just replay the video until it makes sense. And of course, if you still have questions, drop them in the comments below. I'm here to help. Now, I do need to mention a quick disclaimer. This video is not a complete lecture on cultural studies. The interpretations I'll share are my own, so it's a good idea to cross-check the information with your textbooks. While I'll do my best to make the concepts simple and digestible, I highly recommend consulting your professors or mentors to ensure you're getting a comprehensive understanding. So, grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and let's unravel the world of cultural studies together. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, let's dive into our lecture. First off, let me explain what culture is. Culture isn't just one thing, it's everything. It's the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the way we behave, our beliefs, rituals, and the art we create. Culture is deeply connected to our identity, shaping who we are and how we live. But here's the interesting part. Not everyone's culture is the same. It varies from place to place, person to person. In essence, culture is everything that makes up a way of life. It's what defines us, what sets us apart, and yet it's also what brings us together. Welcome to the third slide of our lecture on cultural studies. In this slide, we'll explore what cultural studies is and why it's such a fascinating field. Cultural studies is an interdisciplinary field, which means it doesn't belong to just one area of study. Instead, it draws from many different disciplines like literature, religion, ethnography, history, sociology, psychology, and more. It's like weaving a rich tapestry where each thread represents a different field, coming together to help us understand culture in a deeper, more comprehensive way. So why is this interdisciplinary approach important? Because culture itself is multifaceted. It's not just about one thing, it's about everything that shapes our world and our lives. Cultural studies examines how culture is created, maintained, and transformed over time, and how power plays a role in these processes. Let me give you some examples to illustrate this. Take the rise of fast food and street food culture. Not long ago, these were considered less prestigious, but today they're celebrated and have become an integral part of our lives. Similarly, think about the trend of men growing beards or the popularity of tattoos among the younger generation. What was once associated with certain groups or subcultures has now become mainstream and, in many cases, unavoidable. These transformations show how culture evolves and how what's accepted or celebrated can shift over time, influenced by various factors. Welcome to the fourth slide of our lecture on cultural studies. Now, let's talk about how cultural studies officially emerged as an academic discipline. This journey began at the Birmingham School, specifically at the Centre for Contemporary Cultural Studies, CCCS, at the University of Birmingham. Founded in 1964, the CCCS became a pivotal institution in shaping the field of cultural studies. It was established by some of the most influential thinkers of the time, Stuart Hall, Raymond Williams, and Richard Hoggart. These scholars laid the groundwork for what would become a rich, diverse, and dynamic area of study. For years, the CCCS served as a hub for groundbreaking research, exploring the intersections of culture, society, and power. It provided a space where ideas could flourish, challenging traditional academic boundaries, and fostering a deeper understanding of culture in all its forms. Unfortunately, the centre closed in the 1990s, but its legacy lives on. The work done at the CCCS continues to influence scholars and students around the world, keeping the spirit of cultural studies alive and thriving. Understanding the origins of cultural studies helps us appreciate its depth and the intellectual effort that has gone into making it what it is today. A field that encourages us to look at culture from multiple perspectives, questioning, analyzing, and interpreting the world around us. In this slide, we'll talk about the incredible contributions of Stuart Hall to cultural studies. Hall's work was vast and multifaceted, making him one of the central figures in the field. As the director of the Centre for Contemporary Cultural Studies, CCCS, at Birmingham, he played a key role in shaping cultural studies as we know it today. One of Hall's key ideas was about the power dynamics within culture. He believed that culture isn't just about what we see or experience, it's also where power is exercised and can even be challenged. He argued that culture is a battleground where different groups struggle over meaning and control. Hall also developed the famous encoding-decoding model, which helps us understand how media messages are created and interpreted. He emphasized that audiences aren't just passive consumers of media, they actively interpret and find meaning in what they watch, read, or listen to. Another important concept Hall explored is representation. He argued that the way things are shown in media or culture isn't just a reflection of reality, it actually shapes reality. Representations are tied to power, influencing how we see the world and ourselves. Hall also focused a lot on cultural identity, examining how our identities are formed through culture. He looked at how cultural meanings and practices shape who we are. Some of his most influential works include Policing the Crisis, which explored the links between media, crime, and state power, Resistance Through Rituals, which studied youth subcultures, and The Politics of Thatcherism, which analyzed the rise of Thatcherism in Britain. His essay Encoding and Decoding in the TV Discourse is a foundational text in media studies, providing deep insights into how media communication works. In this slide, we'll explore the influential contributions of Raymond Williams to cultural studies. Williams redefined the way we think about culture, famously describing it as a whole way of life and as something ordinary. This means that culture isn't just about art or high society, it's about the everyday lives, practices, and meanings created by ordinary people. This perspective, often called culturalism, emphasizes that culture is rooted in the everyday experiences of people. Williams believed that culture is a lived experience, particularly focusing on how the working class actively constructs its own cultural world. Williams also introduced the idea of cultural materialism, which looks at how culture is shaped by the material conditions of its production, things like economic factors, labor, and the social environment. He argued that meanings and representations are not just abstract ideas, but are deeply connected to these material processes. Another key concept from Williams is the structure of feeling, which refers to the shared experiences, emotions, and attitudes of a particular time and place. It's about the collective mood or atmosphere that isn't always easy to pin down, but is felt by those living through it. Williams' influential works, such as Culture and Society, 1958, and Keywords, 1976, laid the foundation for cultural studies. His ideas were deeply rooted in his own working-class background and his commitment to democracy and socialism. He pushed the boundaries of what culture could be, moving beyond elite or high art and legitimizing the study of popular culture. Let's take a quick look at Richard Hoggart and his key contributions to cultural studies. Hoggart's book, The Uses of Literacy, was groundbreaking. He legitimized the study of working-class culture, focusing on the everyday lives and practices of ordinary people. His approach was humanist and detailed, offering a compassionate view of British working-class life in the 1950s, contrasting it with the rise of commercial culture. Hoggart's work helped lay the foundation for the field of cultural studies, emphasizing the importance of understanding culture from the perspective of those who live it. He was also a key figure in establishing the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies at Birmingham University. In this slide, we'll briefly mention some other influential thinkers who have made significant contributions to cultural studies outside of the Birmingham School. These thinkers have enriched the field with their unique perspectives and ideas. My pronunciation of these names may be incorrect, as these thinkers come from different nations with distinct native pronunciations. I encourage you to verify their pronunciation from other sources, especially your teachers and academicians. E.P. Thompson, Louis Althusser, Antonio Gramsci, Michel Foucault, Theodor Adorno, Jean Baudrillard, Jacques Derrida, Walter Benjamin, Fredric Jameson, Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak, Judith Butler, Homi Bhabha, Pierre Bourdieu, James Clifford, Edward Said, Jean-François Lyotard, Ranajit Guha, Stephen Greenblatt, and Paul Gilroy. In the upcoming slides, we'll dive deeper into each of these thinkers, discussing their key concepts and important works. So, stay tuned as we explore their fascinating contributions to cultural studies. In this slide, we'll talk about E.P. Thompson and his impactful contributions to cultural studies and history. Thompson is best known for his approach called History from Below, which focused on the lives and actions of ordinary people, rather than just the elites. This perspective gave voice to those who were often overlooked in traditional historical narratives. Thompson played a key role in the development of the New Left, a movement that sought fresh alternatives to both strict Marxism and capitalism, aiming for a more humane and just society. His groundbreaking book, The Making of the English Working Class, is a must-read. In it, he shows how working-class identity and consciousness were actively shaped through historical events and struggles, not just passively received. Thompson was also critical of Althusserian theory, particularly its lack of attention to the real-life, historical context. He felt that it often prioritized abstract ideas over the actual, lived experiences of people. A central theme in Thompson's work was the role of experience in shaping social consciousness. He believed that people's personal and collective experiences were crucial in understanding how they saw and responded to the world around them. In works like Customs in Common, Thompson explored the cultural and social dimensions of law and tradition, emphasizing how they were intertwined with the everyday lives of people. While his work was influenced by Marxism, he wasn't afraid to critique aspects of it, particularly economic determinism, which oversimplifies the complex ways society and culture interact. Thompson combined meticulous historical research with a deep commitment to social justice and a belief in human agency, the power of people to shape their own history. His work remains a cornerstone in both cultural studies and historical research. Let's talk about Louis Althusser, a Marxist theorist who had a huge impact on cultural studies. Althusser offered a structuralist interpretation of Marx, which was different from the early humanism of Marx's work. He argued that social life is shaped by complex, overdetermined relationships between different areas of society, things like politics, culture, and economics. One of his most important ideas was the concept of ideological state apparatus, ISAs, which include institutions like the family, the education system, the church, and the media. These institutions play a big role in spreading ideology, or the way we think about the world. Althusser believed that ideology doesn't just reflect the world, it actually shapes us into subjects by hailing or calling us into certain roles. In other words, we are shaped by the systems around us before we even realize it. Althusser's work marked a break with the idea of economic determinism, the belief that economic forces determine everything in society. He gave more autonomy to cultural and ideological factors in shaping people's lives. His ideas are often linked to anti-humanism, meaning he didn't see individuals as free agents who shape their own destiny, but rather as products of social structures and ideology. Some of Althusser's key works include For Marx and Lenin and Philosophy. While his ideas pushed the boundaries of cultural studies, his writing was dense and difficult to follow, and some critics found his approach too rigid or simplistic. His view of ideology as something that works behind the scenes in these systems has also been critiqued for suggesting that we don't have any control over how we are shaped by society. Next, we have Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist theorist whose ideas have profoundly shaped political and cultural thought. Gramsci introduced the concept of hegemony, which explains how ruling classes maintain dominance not just through force but by shaping culture and ideology to make their power seem natural. This is reinforced through institutions like media, education, and religion, embedding beliefs as common sense and limiting resistance. One of his most significant contributions was the idea of organic intellectuals, individuals who emerge from marginalized communities to challenge dominant ideologies. Unlike traditional intellectuals who serve existing power structures, organic intellectuals help articulate and advance the struggles of the working class. Gramsci also emphasized that common sense is not neutral, but shaped by history and ideology, meaning it can be critically examined and redefined. Gramsci's idea of the national popular stressed that revolutionary movements must connect with the lived experiences of ordinary people to achieve meaningful change. His most influential work, The Prison Notebooks, was written during his imprisonment under Mussolini's fascist regime, where he explored these theories in depth. His rejection of economic determinism and his belief in the power of culture and ideology set him apart from other Marxist thinkers. Though his writing can be complex, Gramsci's insights remain essential in understanding modern power structures, from media influence to political ideologies. His legacy reminds us that power is not just enforced, it is constructed and maintained through ideas. And if ideas uphold power, they can also dismantle it. Introducing Michel Foucault, a French philosopher whose ideas have profoundly influenced the study of power, knowledge, and discourse. Foucault explored how power operates not just through laws and institutions, but through knowledge and discourse, shaping how we understand reality itself. One of his key concepts is discourse, the ways in which language and knowledge construct our perception of the world. He introduced the idea of the episteme, or overarching systems of knowledge that define what is considered true in different historical periods. For Foucault, power and knowledge are intertwined, meaning that knowledge is not neutral, but serves power structures. Foucault's method of archaeology analyzed historical shifts in knowledge systems, while genealogy examined how power relations shape history and social institutions. In Discipline and Punish, he introduced disciplinary power, explaining how modern institutions, like schools, prisons, and hospitals, control individuals through surveillance and normalization, rather than direct force. His work, Madness and Civilization, explored how societies define and treat mental illness, showing how power dictates what is considered normal and abnormal. In The History of Sexuality, he examined how discourse around sexuality has evolved, revealing how institutions regulate personal identity. Foucault's ideas remain essential for understanding how knowledge, institutions, and power shape our world. His legacy challenges us to question accepted truths and recognize the hidden structures that govern our lives. Let's talk about Theodor Adorno, a key figure in the Frankfurt School, whose work combined Marxist and psychoanalytic theory to critique modern capitalist society. Adorno, along with Max Horkheimer, co-wrote The Dialectic of Enlightenment, which explored how reason and progress, instead of leading to liberation, had become tools of domination. One of Adorno's most influential ideas is the concept of the culture industry. He argued that mass-produced entertainment, from Hollywood films to popular music, serves to pacify the masses and maintain social control. Rather than encouraging critical thought, the culture industry reinforces conformity and consumerism. Adorno also valued avant-garde modernist art for its alien nature, its ability to disrupt everyday expectations and resist commodification. He saw such art as a form of resistance against the homogenization imposed by capitalist culture. His book, Minima Moralia, is a collection of reflections on ethics and the contradictions of modern life, offering a deeply personal critique of contemporary society. Throughout his work, Adorno remained critical of how ideology shapes consciousness, urging individuals to resist the passive consumption of culture and seek genuine autonomy. His legacy remains significant in cultural and critical theory, reminding us to question the ways in which media, art, and ideology shape our perception of the world. Now let's turn our attention to Jean Baudrillard, a French philosopher whose work explored the effects of commodification, media, and technology on contemporary society. Baudrillard is best known for his concepts of hyperreality and simulacra, which describe how representations in media and culture have replaced and distorted our sense of reality. In his book, Simulacra and Simulations, Baudrillard argues that modern society no longer distinguishes between reality and representation. Instead, we live in a world of simulacra, images and signs that no longer refer to any real object, but only to each other. This creates hyperreality, where everything is mediated and manufactured, making it impossible to experience an unfiltered reality. Baudrillard also introduced the concept of the commodity sign, where objects are valued not for their practical use, but for the status and identity they signify. In a consumer-driven world, we buy things not for their function, but for what they represent, further deepening our detachment from reality. His idea of the symbolic challenges the way meaning is constructed and exchanged in society, questioning whether true, authentic meaning can even exist in a world dominated by signs and media. Baudrillard's work remains crucial in media studies, philosophy, and cultural criticism, prompting us to reconsider the illusions we take for granted and how consumer culture shapes our perception of the world. Next, we have Jacques Derrida, a French philosopher best known for developing deconstruction, a method of analyzing texts that challenges the idea of fixed meanings. Derrida critiqued the notion of stable binary structures in language, arguing that meaning is always shifting and dependent on context. One of his key concepts is différance, a term that plays on the ideas of both difference and deferral. He argued that meaning is never fully present in a word, but is always deferred through an endless chain of interpretations. This idea undermines the traditional belief that language can convey absolute truth. Derrida also challenged logocentrism, the Western philosophical tendency to prioritize speech over writing, believing that spoken language is closer to meaning. He argued that writing is not secondary to speech, but a fundamental part of how meaning is constructed and altered over time. His idea of undecidability suggests that texts do not have single, fixed meanings, but contain contradictions and ambiguities that prevent definitive interpretation. This is evident in works like of Grammatology, where he deconstructs philosophical texts to reveal their hidden assumptions. In Archive Fever, he explores how history and memory are shaped by the way information is stored and interpreted. Derrida's work remains essential in philosophy, literary criticism, and cultural studies, urging us to question the stability of meaning and recognize the complexities hidden within language and texts. In this slide, let's talk about the contributions of Walter Benjamin, a German-Jewish Marxist theorist and cultural critic whose work explored history, art, and modernity through a dialectical approach. Benjamin sought to understand how historical materialism and cultural production shape human perception and experience. One of his most famous concepts is aura, which refers to the unique presence of an artwork in time and space. He argued in The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction that mass production erodes this aura, changing how we engage with art and culture. Benjamin's idea of the dialectical image suggests that history can be understood through fragmented, allegorical moments rather than a linear narrative. His engagement with montage, a technique borrowed from film and literature, emphasized how juxtaposition can reveal hidden historical truths. The flaneur, another key figure in Benjamin's work, represents the urban wanderer who observes modern life with a critical eye. This concept is central to the Arcades project, also known as Passagen work, his unfinished study of 19th-century Paris, where he examined consumer culture, architecture, and the shifting experience of time. In One Way Street, Benjamin combined philosophy, literature, and critique in an experimental form, reflecting his belief that ideas should be presented in non-traditional ways. His work remains essential in cultural studies, media theory, and philosophy, offering a revolutionary perspective on how history, memory, and art intersect in modern society. Let's talk about Fredric Jameson, an American cultural critic and Marxist theorist best known for his analysis of postmodernism. Jameson explored how late capitalism shapes culture, history, and ideology, particularly through the lens of postmodernism, or the cultural logic of late capitalism. One of Jameson's key ideas is pastiche, which he describes as imitation without satire or critique. Unlike parody, pastiche in postmodern culture simply mimics past styles, resulting in a loss of historical depth. This connects to his discussion of simulacrum, where representations no longer refer to any original reality, creating a fragmented and depthless cultural landscape. Jameson also introduced the concept of cognitive mapping, which refers to how individuals navigate and make sense of the vast, globalized structures of late capitalism. He argued that in an era of multinational corporations and digital media, traditional ways of understanding social and economic structures have become more abstract and disorienting. His work critiques postmodernism as a condition where history is flattened into a spectacle, where everything is reduced to surface aesthetics rather than deeper meaning. Jameson's theories challenge us to see how economic and political forces shape cultural production, urging a renewed historical consciousness in an age of cultural recycling. His insights remain influential in literary criticism, media theory, and cultural studies, helping us understand how postmodernism both reflects and obscures the realities of contemporary capitalism. In this slide, let's meet Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak, an Indian-born scholar whose work has profoundly influenced post-colonial theory and literary criticism. Drawing from Derrida's deconstruction, Spivak examines power, language, and representation, particularly concerning marginalized voices. One of her most famous concepts is the subaltern, referring to those who exist outside dominant power structures and whose voices are often silenced. In her seminal essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, Spivak critiques Western intellectuals for speaking on behalf of the oppressed, rather than allowing them to represent themselves. She argues that the subaltern is often unheard because their voices are mediated and distorted by elite structures. Spivak's A Critique of Post-Colonial Reason expands on these ideas, analyzing how colonial discourse continues to shape knowledge and representation. She critiques the complicity of Western academia in reinforcing imperialist narratives, urging scholars to be self-reflective and politically engaged. In Outside in the Teaching Machine, Spivak examines the role of education in shaping ideological structures, emphasizing the need for critical pedagogy that empowers marginalized voices rather than assimilating them into dominant frameworks. Her work remains central to discussions on feminism, decolonization, and global inequality, challenging us to rethink how knowledge and power operate in a world still shaped by colonial histories. Let's talk about Judith Butler, a philosopher and gender theorist, whose work has fundamentally reshaped how we understand gender and identity. Butler argues that sex is not a fixed biological fact, but a regulatory ideal, a socially constructed norm that enforces binary gender distinctions. One of Butler's most influential concepts is performativity, introduced in Gender Trouble. She argues that gender is not something we are born with, but something we do, a repeated set of behaviors, gestures, and expressions that create the illusion of a stable identity. This challenges the notion that gender is natural or inherent. Butler also critiques what she calls the heterosexual matrix, the cultural framework that assumes heterosexuality as the default and enforces rigid gender roles. She argues that this system marginalizes identities that do not fit neatly into binary categories. In Bodies That Matter, Butler expands on these ideas, exploring how certain bodies are recognized as legitimate while others are excluded or erased from discourse. She examines how power and language shape who is considered fully human and whose lives are deemed grievable. Her work remains central to feminist theory, LGBTQ+ studies, and critical philosophy, pushing us to rethink identity, normativity, and the structures that shape our understanding of the self. Let's talk about Homi K. Bhabha, a key figure in postcolonial theory whose work explores identity, cultural hybridity, and colonial discourse. Bhabha challenges fixed notions of culture and identity, emphasizing how colonialism creates new, fluid forms of belonging. One of his most influential ideas is hybridity, which describes how cultures blend and transform through colonial encounters. Instead of a simple opposition between colonizer and colonized, Bhabha argues that new identities emerge in between, disrupting fixed hierarchies. Closely related is his concept of mimicry, where the colonized adopt elements of the colonizer's culture, but with a difference that subtly subverts authority. This creates what Bhabha calls the third space, an in-between realm where meaning is negotiated and new cultural forms arise. In The Location of Culture, Bhabha expands on these ideas, examining how language, literature, and power shape post-colonial identities. He critiques the idea of pure, essential cultures, showing instead how all cultures are formed through historical interaction and adaptation. His work remains vital in post-colonial studies, challenging rigid cultural binaries and highlighting how identity is always evolving in response to historical and political forces. Let's talk about Pierre Bourdieu, a French sociologist whose work explores power, social structures, and cultural production. Bourdieu developed key concepts that help us understand how social hierarchies are maintained and reproduced. One of his central ideas is habitus, the ingrained habits, dispositions, and ways of thinking that individuals develop through their social environment. Habitus shapes how people act, think, and navigate the world, often without them being consciously aware of it. Bourdieu also introduced the concept of the field, which refers to different social arenas, such as art, politics, or education, where individuals compete for power and influence. Each field has its own rules, structures, and forms of capital that determine success. A crucial part of Bourdieu's theory is cultural capital, which refers to non-economic forms of social advantage, such as education, language, and taste. He argued that cultural capital plays a significant role in maintaining social inequality, as the elite use it to reinforce their status. In Distinction, a social critique of the judgment of taste, Bourdieu examined how taste is not just a matter of personal preference, but is shaped by social class. He showed how cultural consumption reflects and reinforces social divisions, making class inequalities appear natural. Bourdieu's work remains essential in sociology, education, and cultural studies, offering deep insights into how power and privilege operate in everyday life. In this slide, let's meet James Clifford, an American anthropologist whose work examines culture, travel, and hybridity. Clifford challenges traditional ideas of culture as static and bounded, instead emphasizing its fluid and ever-changing nature. One of his key concepts is the art-culture system, which critiques how non-Western art has been historically categorized and commodified by Western institutions. He argues that museums and galleries shape our understanding of what is considered authentic culture, often reinforcing colonial power dynamics. Clifford also explores hybridity, the idea that cultures are not pure or isolated but formed through historical contact, exchange, and adaptation. This perspective highlights the complexities of identity in a globalized world. In The Predicament of Culture, he examines how anthropology and ethnography construct representations of non-Western societies, questioning the authority of Western scholars in defining other cultures. His book Roots, Travel and Translation in the Late 20th Century further investigates how movement, migration, and translation shape cultural identities, arguing that travel is not just about physical movement, but also about how ideas and identities are transformed across borders. Clifford's work remains highly influential in anthropology, cultural studies, and post-colonial theory, encouraging us to rethink culture as a dynamic and contested space rather than a fixed set of traditions. Let's take a look at Edward Said, a Palestinian-American scholar whose work critically examines power, discourse and cultural imperialism. Said's groundbreaking book, Orientalism, exposed how Western representations of the East were shaped by colonial attitudes, reinforcing stereotypes and justifying imperial control. Said argued that Orientalism is not just a set of false ideas, but a powerful discourse, a system of knowledge and representation that serves political interests. This discourse portrays the East as exotic, backward, and inferior to the rational, advanced West, reinforcing a hierarchy that legitimizes Western dominance. His work also explores the concept of the other, showing how colonial powers construct identities that position non-Western people as different, dangerous, or uncivilized. This process justifies intervention and control, shaping global politics and cultural perceptions. In Culture and Imperialism, Said expands on these ideas, analyzing how literature and media contribute to sustaining imperial narratives. He reveals how Western cultural works subtly reinforce colonial ideology, even in seemingly neutral or apolitical contexts. Said's critique of cultural imperialism remains essential in post-colonial studies, international relations, and media analysis. His work challenges us to question dominant narratives and consider how power shapes knowledge, urging a more critical and self-aware approach to global history and representation. Let's talk about Jean-François Lyotard, a philosopher best known for his analysis of postmodernism and the critique of grand narratives. In The Postmodern Condition, a report on knowledge, Lyotard argues that modern societies rely on meta-narratives, large, overarching stories that claim to explain historical progress, truth, and meaning. He critiques these meta-narratives as overly simplistic and oppressive, advocating for skepticism toward universal truths. Instead of grand theories, Lyotard emphasizes language games, a concept borrowed from Wittgenstein, which suggests that meaning is shaped by different social contexts and modes of discourse. He argues that knowledge is fragmented and that multiple, competing narratives exist rather than a single, objective truth. Another key idea is the differend, which refers to conflicts where opposing sides cannot agree on the terms of debate because they operate within different frameworks of meaning. Lyotard highlights how power determines which narratives gain legitimacy, often marginalizing alternative perspectives. His work challenges the authority of institutionalized knowledge, questioning who gets to define truth and how knowledge is produced in society. By rejecting universal explanations, Lyotard's postmodernism encourages diversity in thought and a greater awareness of the political nature of knowledge. His ideas remain highly influential in philosophy, literary theory, and cultural studies, prompting us to critically examine dominant narratives and embrace complexity in our understanding of the world. Let's take a look at Ranajit Guha, an Indian historian and a foundational figure in subaltern studies, a field that re-examines history from the perspective of marginalized groups. Guha's work focuses on the subaltern classes, those who exist outside elite historical narratives and whose voices have been systematically erased. Guha challenged dominant historiography by showing how colonial and nationalist histories often overlooked the role of peasants, workers, and indigenous communities in shaping historical events. His work revealed that resistance movements were not just led by elites, but were deeply rooted in the struggles of ordinary people. One of his significant contributions was a detailed analysis of the Hunan Qiangxi report by Mao Zedong, which explored peasant revolts and revolutionary movements in China. Guha saw parallels between these uprisings and colonial resistance in India, emphasizing the agency of subaltern groups in challenging power structures. Through works like Elementary Aspects of Peasant Insurgency in Colonial India, Guha demonstrated how subaltern movements operated outside the dominant political frameworks, using their own modes of communication and resistance. His research reshaped historical studies by shifting focus from elites to the everyday struggles of the oppressed. Guha's legacy remains essential in post-colonial studies, inspiring scholars to recover hidden histories and challenge conventional narratives that privilege elite perspectives over the voices of the marginalized. Let's talk about Stephen Greenblatt, a literary scholar and a key figure in New Historicism, an approach that examines literature in relation to the historical and cultural contexts in which it was produced. Greenblatt argues that no writer is free from their own interpretation and biases, and that texts should be analyzed as products of their time. One of his major contributions is the idea of cultural poetics, which explores how literature both reflects and shapes cultural and political structures. Instead of viewing texts as isolated works of genius, Greenblatt examines how they interact with power, ideology, and social forces. In Renaissance Self-Fashioning, Greenblatt explores how individuals in the Renaissance shaped their identities through literature, performance, and social expectations. He demonstrates how figures like Shakespeare and Thomas More were influenced by the cultural and political forces of their time, challenging the idea of autonomous artistic creation. His essay Towards a Poetics of Culture further develops these ideas, emphasizing that literature is embedded in a web of historical forces, rather than being purely aesthetic or timeless. While Greenblatt's approach has been widely influential, some scholars criticize New Historicism for being overly deterministic, suggesting that it focuses too much on power structures and not enough on individual agency. Others argue that it tends to prioritize great texts from the literary canon, reinforcing traditional hierarchies. Despite these critiques, Greenblatt's work remains essential for understanding how literature and history intersect, encouraging a more dynamic and historically engaged approach to literary studies. Let's talk about Paul Gilroy, a cultural theorist best known for his work on race, diaspora, and hybridity. In The Black Atlantic, Modernity and Double Consciousness, Gilroy challenges traditional notions of national identity, arguing that Black culture is shaped by transnational exchanges and historical experiences of migration and displacement. One of his key concepts is the Black Atlantic, which describes how the cultures of Africa, the Americas, the Caribbean, and Europe are interconnected through the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade. Gilroy rejects the idea that Black identity is tied to a single nation, emphasizing instead its diasporic and hybrid nature. He also critiques essentialism, the belief in fixed racial or cultural identities. In There Ain't No Black in the Union Jack, he examines race and nationalism in Britain, exposing how racist ideologies shape national belonging and marginalize Black communities. His work highlights how culture is always in flux, resisting simplistic categories of identity. Gilroy's ideas on hybridity draw from multiple traditions, showing how Black identity is constructed through encounters with different cultures, histories, and political struggles. His work is deeply critical of racial purity narratives and instead celebrates the dynamic, evolving nature of diasporic cultures. His contributions to cultural studies and post-colonial theory remain highly influential, encouraging a more complex and fluid understanding of race, identity, and belonging in a globalized world. Now, let's highlight why cultural studies matters. Unlike traditional academic disciplines that separate literature, sociology, and history, cultural studies challenges these boundaries and takes an interdisciplinary approach. It critiques the rigid divisions between high and low culture, questioning who gets to define knowledge and why. A key focus of cultural studies is social change. It doesn't just analyze texts and media for their aesthetic qualities, but investigates how they shape and are shaped by power, ideology, and identity. It explores how marginalized voices resist dominant narratives and how culture becomes a site of struggle. Cultural studies also deciphers social constructions. It examines how concepts like race, gender, and class are not inherent but are created through discourse, media, and institutions. By analyzing the ways these categories are built and maintained, cultural studies exposes the power dynamics behind them and opens the door for critique and transformation. What makes cultural studies especially important is its relevance outside the university. Unlike some academic fields that remain isolated in theoretical discussions, cultural studies engages with real-world issues, media representation, politics, consumer culture, and activism. It provides tools to understand the cultural forces that shape everyday life, making it a valuable framework for critically navigating the modern world. By questioning dominant ideologies and emphasizing cultural agency, cultural studies encourages us to think critically about the world we live in and to imagine possibilities for social change. The lecture does not end here. Due to the limitations of time and length, I have to wrap it up for now, but I am eager to create more videos covering topics and subtopics from cultural studies, English literature, history, arts, and many other subjects. If you found this video helpful, or if you noticed any mistakes, misinterpretations, or missing information, please share your thoughts in the comments. If you have suggestions for future videos, feel free to mention the topic you'd like to see covered. Share this video with your peers, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video.